Welcome to another episode of the Tech Transfer Podcast. I'm Dave Brown. I'm here with Bennett Mortensen, and today we're talking about artificial intelligence and university tech transfer. So Bennett, when you think about the tech transfer industry and the emergency of artificial intelligence tools, what do you think is the opportunity?
Yeah, well, I think with tech transfer, the most obvious opportunity is in cutting out some of the busy work that we end up doing, even simple things like drafting outreach emails or reaching out to people on LinkedIn. It can just really help to speed up that process, as well as using it as a sounding board when it comes to, where it might be a good fit for technologies, right? So one thing that I've done is I'll chat with it and, put in some generic information about the technology and try to get some recommendations from it for where might be a good resource or where might be a good fit for the technology to go for commercialization, right? So I think reducing just time that we spend on these things is the first one, and then using it as a sounding board can be really helpful.
Okay. And there could be some cost savings from other areas, I think. For example, legal work. I talked to a legal startup recently who they do kind of AI-generated claims for provisional patent applications, and it could reduce your cost of full applications. If you're doing a large volume of legal work, that could help. Like you mentioned, contracts, things that are just repetitive. I find myself using it for email sometimes. They're just like very common emails we have to respond to. If it can save some time, that's great. And so ultimately, tech transfer offices, like almost all of us will complain that we're understaffed. Here at BYU, we have 3 of us doing licensing and a controller and a relationships manager and many student employees. But that's for, like, this year, we're on track to get maybe 70 to 80 new inventions disclosed to us. And each one of them has this big pipeline of work we need to do. So if parts of that can be taken over by AI, that's super helpful.
Yeah, even simple things like image generation for sell sheets, right? Or for podcast thumbnails, right? Like things that in the past would have taken a lot of time or a specialized set of skills or outsourcing to somebody and then communicating back and forth. Now you can just do it yourself, right? And do something that is good enough and even better than what you might have seen in the past and do it very, very quickly.
Okay, yeah. So let's mention, and I hope this is useful to other tech transfer offices. Let's talk about specific ways we're actually using AI right now. So you mentioned sell sheets, and you said image generation, which is the major part of a sell sheet. But then I'll upload a patent to ChatGPT, and at this point, we're recording this when ChatGPT 4.0 came out maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. So I'll upload a patent, and then it'll come out with an image and also kind of the different elements of the sell sheet, like selling points, title, contact information. That looks pretty nice. We have a graphic designer who then makes it look even better, but you maybe wouldn't have to. Like, it would look pretty good to begin with. So marketing material obviously is a big one. How else are you using AI?
Yeah, I think that's the primary thing there is just doing that initial creative dump of, here's a ton of information, give me something that might work. And then obviously you can tailor it to your needs. I think people can abuse the AI, right? Where you just dump in information and whatever it spits out, you use that. But I think that that's never going to be the right approach, at least in this industry, right? Because everything's going to need to be reviewed for accuracy, relevancy, and then does it actually appeal to the market that you're trying to get it to appeal to, right? Because it can create any kind of image, but if it's not highlighting the parts of the technology that are relevant to the industry, then you're going to need to iterate through that several times before you find one that actually works. So I think image generation, just content generation for marketing. We deal with a lot of different types of technology. And so it's helpful to have a sounding board of just like a generic conversation of, hey, where would be a good fit for this, right? So I find myself using that a lot, where, like you mentioned, we have lots of incoming technologies. We can't be an expert on every single piece of technology, but at least we can have a conversation of where it might fit with something, the AI that has vastly more general knowledge than I think any one person really could have.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I'll be driving home from work. I'll have my Meta glasses on, talking to the ChatGPT on my phone, and I will just have conversations about technologies or different things we're trying to do. It actually is a really helpful sounding board. And a lot of the use cases you just mentioned are related to selling, selling and marketing. So sell sheets. Is it fair to say that the part of commercialization that tech transfer offices tend to hate the most or avoid the most is selling? It's actually marketing and getting out there and talking to people, right?
Yeah,
and so
absolutely. And we've talked about that a bunch recently, that this is really a huge opportunity, a gateway into making that more efficient and relevant to tech transfer, because there's so many things to do with incoming disclosures, right? You need to review them, review patentability, file the patents, follow up on those, meet with professors, make sure you understand the technology. There's a lot of just things that can take up all of your time, and then marketing ends up on the back burner. So this is a really easy way to bring that to the forefront and make it something that you can actively work on day in, day out, and still have time to take care of everything else that you're asked to do.
Yeah, and those other things that you're asked to do, one perverse element of this is other people are asking you to do those things. Professors will ask you to look at their technologies. The other people on campus are going to ask you to review documents and so on. But for selling, for actually being out there pushing a technology, no one's going to ask you to do that. It's completely self-motivated. So having tools is helpful. And so when we think through our process, we have sell sheet creation, which you've talked about. And then X is kind of positioning, identifying what the product is, which is kind of what you talked about when you could have a conversation with AI about that. And then after that, you have to identify who are the prospects. And so this is where AI has helped me out quite a bit in identifying companies or industries. I've tried to get it to identify individuals, and ChatGPT doesn't like to do that because it's worried about privacy. And then LinkedIn somehow limits it. It can't just go grab a bunch of contacts for you from LinkedIn, but it can tell you the type of person to look for. So that's been my experience with that.
Yeah, and I think some of those limitations will probably come off over time, right? As companies get more confident in what kind of data they're able to harvest from, just the interwebs generally. But even just giving you a starting point, like we talked about, there's so many different pieces of technology that we're covering, and some of them are very, very niche industries, right? And so to generally have knowledge of what companies are existing in that space and, doing anything, it would be incredibly hard to do just for any one individual. So again, that sounding board, being able to reach out and here's a list of 10 companies that are related to this field, super helpful in getting started to start looking at who to reach out to in those different companies.
Yeah, and so like I'm working on a sports analytics technology right now, and so I could totally, and I've done this sort of thing with AI. I could say, find me a YouTube video where someone in the sports analytics industry is being interviewed about this type of technology, and it would probably find me a link for that. And yeah, I could go search for it myself, but when I'm driving in the car, I'm not going to. It's a time saver, and it does get awfully good results often. So another thing is, and I think you and I both use ChatGPT a lot. On campus at BYU, everyone has access to Copilot and Microsoft. I have not played around with that much, but a lot of people seem to like that. One tool we have used is Quilify.ai, which is a startup company. Do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, a little bit. And you can fill in anything that I misremember about them. But my understanding is that Quilify is able to identify grant opportunities specifically for startups, and really relevant to us since we have so much incoming technology that we've been able to use that to generate a list of funding opportunities related to the technologies with the specific SBIR solicitations associated with them. And we've talked about SBIR a lot on our podcast, but for anybody who needs a quick refresher, SBIR is a Small Business Innovation Research Grant from the federal government. And it's basically money that comes into your company that helps you tackle all the complexities of high-risk technical startup company would have. And typically, you would want to partner up with a professor. And so having a piece of technology that's already linked to a university professor with a funding opportunity that is directly correlated, using AI to match this up, there's, months and months of work that you could do on your own that are literally now at your fingertips. So you can pick up the tech, get introduced to the professor, license the technology, apply for the funding, and save yourself 6 months of that effort and get really into the nitty-gritty of starting that company.
Yeah, and so it puts us in a position, thanks to their work, we had them do 600 technologies for us. And so for those technologies, that's essentially our entire portfolio of technologies that aren't already licensed. And so for those, we can show someone a sell sheet and say, here's the technology, and then this other sheet is a list of grant opportunities. And for an entrepreneur, even if you find a technology that you like, you're asking yourself next, okay, how do I get funding for it? And so we have the answer to that in a way that...
And the fact that this technology matches up with grants is a form of validation of the technology itself, right? Because if it came back and was like, oh, there's no good matches, okay, maybe this is too niche or it's so cutting edge that nobody's really caught on yet. But if you can see the technology and then see that there's active opportunities to get it funded, you can spend a lot of time trying to validate a market. That is one way to have that validation ready for you.
Absolutely. And the Qualify reports. So, and by the way, we have no financial interest in Qualify or anything. We've just taken their service. But their reports will show you the grant opportunity, but it'll also suggest a couple angles for the technology. Like when you apply for this, here's how you position your technology. So that's super helpful.
And that's helpful just generally with our technology disclosures, because a lot of the research is cutting edge technological research, but the market fit can sometimes be hard to identify. What product is actually going to be made here? And so having an angle of this is how you should apply to this grant using maybe this product angle or this specific angle of the technology, super helpful.
Wow, I hadn't even thought about looking that there for product guidance, but that's a really good idea because it's constrained by both the grant and the AI is processing. So
Right.
that's good. So one other area where we're using AI a lot, I think, is on our YouTube channel in social media. So social media is a great use case for AI tools. There are many out there to choose from. For content creation, like we'll do a recording like this. And when I download this episode, I'm recording on Zoom. I'll download it. I'll put the audio folder into my Otter AI folder in Dropbox. So it'll automatically be transcribed. I have that text. I'll put that in ChatGPT to create the description, other metadata for the podcast itself. But I've also used, like sometimes we'll do episodes where we're profiling a technology, like last week's episode. And so you could take that transcript and then have it reduced to kind of a fact sheet that you can send to prospective licensees. So, creating and repurposing data is another really great use.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely a right and a wrong way to use it. And I've probably used it in the wrong way several times. I can think of some LinkedIn posts that I've made where I literally just copied and pasted directly from ChatGPT. And you see people do that, and it's really easy to scroll over that. So you definitely have to be careful. You don't want to be so generic or so obviously AI that people aren't going to actually take a look at the good content that's in there. But with just a little bit of effort, you can tweak things and get it to be exactly what you need it to be.
Yeah. So when you see a LinkedIn post that starts with esteemed colleagues or something like that, ChatGPT.
Right.
So
the very obvious AI generated image where they haven't done any refinement, right? Like it's just, okay, like keep scrolling.
I've definitely done that before. The images have gotten so much better though. And I do use ChatGPT for the images for most of our episodes on here.
Well, and honestly, like you have to start somewhere. So I think sometimes people get nervous, like, oh, I can't post this because it's AI generated or whatever. And it's like, you can, but learn from the feedback, right? If nobody clicks on it, nobody looks at your post, then okay, maybe we need to put a little bit more effort in here, but still saving you gobs and gobs of time compared to either doing the graphic design yourself, outsourcing it, and dealing with some of those issues. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you've highlighted the ability of AI to create content very quickly, but because you can do that, you can also change it very quickly. So you can iterate through. I had one of our episodes where the image just wasn't performing very well. And so I just upload the images to ChatGPT and said, make a better version of this. And I put that on and it seemed to help improve, performance. So
and it can still be wildly frustrating, at least for myself, because sometimes I'll ask it, 20, 30 times to fix something and it just doesn't understand. Now, granted, it's gotten a lot better than it was even a year ago.
Oh, yeah.
But as you continue to use it, you learn how to phrase things or give prompts in a way that it will actually do the things that you want it to do.
Yeah. And so we've experimented with nvideo.io, which is an AI service that will auto-generate videos. So you can give it, I've given it like a description of a technology from an issued patent, and has created a video that kind of highlights the use case for the technology. We posted some shorts like that. They're not great works of art, but it's interesting and getting better. And then we've also
it's helpful for helping individuals digest a patent, right? Most people don't want to sit down and read a patent with all that legal language and try to break out what this is. It does a really good job of making it accessible to somebody where they could click on a 60-second video and, okay, now I understand what the technology is doing.
Yeah.
Even if it's not this great work of art, like you were saying,
Yeah. And so we do that kind of with a major part of our philosophy here on production of content is take these abstract ideas and make them physical for people somehow. So you can create a selfie image that's very visible. That's great. Or if you can do a video that describes it, that's great. And so we'll keep seeing improvements. You can imagine other ways. Now I want to try converting a patent to a comic strip. I think it would probably at this point do that for me.
Yeah, I bet it could.
Okay. And let's see. So there are many other ways we've used Opus Clip also, which I think that's AI. It slices up videos into shorts and does, nice subtitles and things.
I think that one's been incredibly helpful, right? Because even for a podcast like this, we can just upload the entire podcast straight from YouTube, right? Just provide the link. And then again, you still have a little bit of work of like sifting through what are the good clips that are pulled out versus what's the junk, but it's way faster than trying to go through and do the editing. And it just really makes that less time consuming and gives you the content that you need to push out there to highlight the tech in a way that's accessible to people.
Yeah, and like early on, I've created clips manually. Opus clip has got to be like 20 times faster, right? Like it's
Okay,
a
at
massive,
least,
massive
at
thing.
least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it does a good job. It's improving over time, and it's trying to identify what are the salient parts of a conversation or the most, clickbaity parts or whatever.
Yeah. And you still
So,
can go in and do manual edits, right? And
but
really improve the clip based off of what you want it to represent. And it does a good job just getting that bulk heavy lifting done. And then you do the fine tweaking, which is nice.
yeah, as long as we're talking about it. So it'll pull up a transcript, and then if you're like, I don't like where I say for 5 seconds there, like you can highlight the part you don't like and delete it, and it'll edit the whole clip, and it comes out looking pretty smooth and good. So yeah, great. Okay, so those are the principal ways that come to mind. There are some ways that we're not using AI. So what you might be tempted to do I'm tempted to do, is just upload all your disclosures to ChatGPT or whatever service you like, and say, do these 20 steps for me, identify the market, do this research, because they'll do online research. So that would be, in the future, we'll have workflows like that. Right now, privacy issues are kind of preventing us from it. It's like early days of the internet where, we're afraid that if you upload a disclosure, could that be deemed publication, or will it be shared somehow? Like, could it cause some sort of patent problem or confidentiality issue? So I would say, of the outstanding issues, one of the big issues right now is privacy, and it kind of limits what we can do.
Yeah. And I think the hardest problem right now is just the unknown, right? Is we really
Right.
don't know how it's going to be treated in the future. And what we would hate to do is upload, 60 new disclosures and then lose all of our patenting rights because that was considered a public disclosure, right? That would be like a worst case situation for us. So I think we're definitely very conservative in our approach to non-patented technology when it comes to putting that into any kind of AI generation. But you've mentioned it several times where we've uploaded patents, right? And then we have no, they're already public disclosure. You can search them up on Google Patents just as easily as you can anything else. And so using it for that, I think, has been really helpful for us. But yeah, still a concern on the privacy issue. And, does this count as public disclosure if we're sharing this with a AI language model?
Okay, and there are a couple other issues. Let's discuss them in a bit. But while we're talking AI, we've got to talk about recent BYU AI startups. So we have two that come to mind for me, and one was in December, and that was DJ Lee's technology for Authentiface, where you and I talked about it. Do you remember enough to describe it?
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, Authentiface uses AI to identify you not only by facial recognition, but also by a facial gesture. So you might say a word or smile or wink at the camera. And that uses the AI as two-factor authentication, right? So the same way that you would enter a password and then receive a code to your phone and then type that in, this would be similar in terms of security for your devices. And so you could use it for your laptops. You can use it for entryways, walk-ins. What are some other things that we talked about using it for, like hotel check-ins, right? So you don't have to actually carry the key around anymore. You can actually just come check in and scan your face, and you say a word, and now nobody else can get into your room except for you, and you don't have to remember your key. So fantastic use case.
Yeah, I like the idea of any device, like your phone, your car, whatever. I really like the ATM application on YouTube. Some people are very angry about that possibility, but I think it would be a good thing. So I'm saying.
Yeah. I think people get really, we were talking about security and privacy just a second ago, and people get very anxious about the thought of technology having your likeness and, scanning your face and saving that data. And I share some of those concerns, but the reality is like, it's not going away, right? Like this recording here, now somebody has our facial, features, right? And the dual security of Authentiface, where you would have to know the password and have to be able to mimic that exactly. I don't think deepfakes or anything have caught up to that type of realistic portrayal. But either way, like, you can either embrace it, right, and learn with it and be at the cutting edge, or you can shy away from it and be left behind. And I think Authentiface is definitely embracing it and moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm a privacy advocate. Like I would like things to be private, but the biometric stuff, like facial recognition, it's out there. Like everyone has a driver's license, so that makes me comfortable with it. But wherever you stand on the issue, Authentiface is out and going, and they've raised outside investor money at this point. And it's just been a few months. So they're doing really well. And I'll be really excited to see products come from them.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. And then the other one was our podcast episode from last week, which is it's RightGrader is the product. I forget the name of the company, but it's the one where you for teachers, you upload your rubric and then your essay question answers from the students, and it just does all the grading. So instead of staying up late at night grading all these essays, can you imagine 30 plus essays on the exact same question topic you're reading through, trying to differentiate these things? Instead, just let the AI do that. And I've played with it, and the results it produces are quite good. Like, it'll give you commentary on why you lost a few points or whatever. And so I've got to think that teachers are just going to organically find that and use it. It's I believe the address is writegrader.com, right? Like writing a word, and you can use it for free for some period of time.
Yeah. And I think that honestly, like, why wouldn't you want to use AI to reduce your workload? Just like we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, right? There's things that everybody has in every industry that they do not look forward to. My sister was a teacher. She taught middle school for a number of years, and grading papers, grading essays, she hated it, right? So having a way to do that on bulk in mass, and then to spend your time, instead of spending your time up late grading papers, you can actually spend that time coaching and helping the children or whoever is writing the paper into how to get better, how to not make these same errors in the future. So huge time saving for teachers for sure, and for anybody who wants to improve their writing, right? Immediate feedback, I'm sure, on any document that you're putting together. So that's great.
Yeah. And so I kind of like the anarchy of the AI space at this point. Like, there's some use cases, like the right grader people, they were really looking for a pain point. And like you were saying with your sister, like, they found it, that pain definitely exists, but it'll be used other ways. Like, there are many places, like, think about online seminars where people would have essay questions if there were an automated way to grade them, but no one's ever thought of doing it because, like, I'm not going to sit through and grade 600 essays that strangers online submit. But if software is doing it, yeah, you might, if that makes the experience better. So it'll create new services that don't exist right now. I love that. And then I did think, what's his name? Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, right? Mm-hmm. And I saw an interview with him recently, maybe I've mentioned it, where he said, someone said, every time you come out with a new ChatGPT, it destroys a bunch of companies that were built to perform niche functions of one kind or another. And he said, yeah, that's true, but you just have to think about what type of business you want to be. Like, be like Uber, like, be a business that, like, it used the internet, but it wasn't the internet. Like, it couldn't be replaced by, internet providers or search engines or things like that. It was just internet enabled. So you want to be AI enabled. And so, like, RightGrader is a great example of that, because they provide some other services that are awesome for teachers. Like, they'll show your whole grade book and the distribution of scores and things like this. It's none of this is, even the grading is consistent in a way that you couldn't achieve yourself with ChatGPT, or any other service right now. So anyway, both of these startups, I think, have good long-term prospects for what it's worth. So.
Yeah. And I think that's always a concern with any technology. AI is kind of the hot buzzword right now, but there have been concerns about technology taking jobs since, the wheel came to be, right? Or since the cars came and took over the carriage industry, right? Like, there's always going to be jobs that become less relevant because of technological advances. But I think Sam Altman hits the nail on the head, right? Just what does this enable you to do, right? If you're not spending all your time doing this thing that AI can do for you, now how can you use that to become the next Uber, right? Or utilize it and leverage it in a way that fixes a pain point, a true pain point for somebody, not just a pain point that existed because technology hadn't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah. I mean, changes are going to be unpredictable and great. So we've got a couple companies out there doing that, many more coming. And so happy to be a part of it. Okay, so a couple other issues that have come up is one is accuracy. Have you run into accuracy issues using AI?
All the time, yeah. Unfortunately, I never trust anything that ChatGPT or any AI language model tells me inherently. I always have to double check and fact check and make sure. It's still a great jumping off point. But I was actually watching, some legal discussion, and I guess some lawyer had just put in the case that they were working on as a response to something. And it just started making up case numbers and outcomes, and they were using that as citing precedents anyways. And I guess this lawyer's going to getting disbarred and, being sanctioned, or I don't know how all that works, but definitely double check anything that it says to you, right? And again, it's a great jumping off point, but I don't know that it's to a point yet where you can just trust everything that it says outright.
Yeah, I've had it make up website citations for me before, and so, which is essentially the same thing, right? And so, yeah, you got to check that. And it's funny though, because it comes up with a lot of accurate information, like really good information, but you just have to be a little careful. So, okay, so that's an ongoing issue. And then, university policy, I don't mean BYU specifically, but any university is going to have a committee probably right now trying to figure out what to do about AI. There was this great study from BYU that came out maybe a month ago about how students use ChatGPT. And the cynical view is, oh, they're taking all their tests on ChatGPT. And of course, the students are using it for homework and even, for tests and whatever else. But most of the use was more in the role of a tutor. Like they were referring to ChatGPT to help understand concepts and work through homework and things like that. So, anyway, so that's one aspect of university policy. And then the other aspect is just how should people on campus use it? And we'll see how concerned universities are about privacy and things like that.
Yeah. I can only ever see it as being a positive, if I'm being honest, though, because there's always going to be complaints about, specifically students using it. Well, back in my day, I had to go to the library and use the internet, right? Well, 60 years ago, I had to go to the library and actually look up the books and pull them. And just because you're saving time and doing things more efficiently doesn't mean that you're learning less, right? And honestly, it probably just gives you more time to actually learn content rather than spending time trying to find the right content to answer some of the questions that you have. So that's encouraging that the students are using it that way.
Okay, Bennett, it wasn't 60 years ago though. Like I'm not that old. It was like when I was a student here, they had all the card catalogs out here and you would go in the cards to find a book. So, but yeah, so
being generous with the time, and maybe not 60 years ago, maybe
I just did
30 years ago, 40 years ago. Yeah. It's been pretty rapid. Like I grew up with the internet. I remember not having a cell phone and being kind of one of the first generations to have a cell phone. So it's just going to keep changing rapidly. And if you don't embrace it, you are just going to get left behind, I think.
Totally agree. So, so when I started in college, it was like early 90s, early mid 90s. And so the internet was new. And so everyone was just kind of getting on email if you weren't already sort of situation. And so it's really hard not to draw an analogy between AI and the internet. It seems like the same thing to me. It seems like, wow, you should start up crazy AI companies right now because one of them is going to be Amazon, they're going to do all these things. And so that's really exciting. This could be different in some ways. The adoption curve where people get really excited about a technology and then excitement wanes and then it kind of recovers to a stable industry. I forget the name of that chart right now. But man, I haven't seen AI enthusiasm wane very much. Like investors say they're a little less excited or something, but I don't know. It seems...
It helps if it continue to improve so rapidly, right? It'd be one thing if it was like, here was the AI and nothing had changed in the past year and a half, but it's continued to change and improve in measurable ways, right? Like just your interactions with it feel more real and feel more organic than they did 12 months ago, which is crazy. So I think the excitement is definitely still there for it.
Yeah. It's just strange to me to think about how could that cool off. It seems like it'll just go until it takes over everything, but
I'm sure eventually, like, you'll kind of hit that critical mass of like, okay, everything that was obvious has been done. And so the excitement might fizzle away, except for those who are truly enthusiastic or for those who have pain that still needs to be solved utilizing AI. But kind of the hobbyists, right? The people who jumped on initially and just created, a website with 1 million articles on it generated by AI. I think that will kind of taper off over time for sure.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, one weird thing right now is most people my age I talk to, so middle-aged people, most have not used ChatGPT ever.
Really?
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy.
So are you finding it different? Like people you talk to mostly have used it?
Yeah, I feel like most people have used it, but most people haven't found a great use case for it, which I think I'm excited about what we're doing here at Tech Transfer because we've actually found like a pain point that this helps us overcome, right? Specifically on the marketing side of things. But I would say most people in their day-to-day lives still haven't been able to incorporate at least the large language model AI directly into their day-to-day. And I think some of that is still the limited functionality, right? It can't actually send an email for me. Typically, it can't actually send a text for me because that would be the most helpful for a lot of the things that we're doing. But if you're not paying attention to it, it's going to get to that point and then you're going to be behind the curve, right? And then you're not going to actually be able to utilize it until after everybody else has taken advantage of it. So I think using it in its current form is only going to help prepare you for when it gets a little bit better and kind of crosses that threshold into being, your day-to-day. You don't write emails anymore. You just have ChatGPT or whoever it is, edit it, format it, read it to you, send it to whoever you want it to go to.
Totally agree. And again, when I'm on the go, I do have it compose emails for me. It's just right now you have to copy it and paste it into your email program afterwards. Still way better than thinking through it and writing, But yeah, with the internet, some people got left behind a little bit and kind of just never caught up to get, technologically savvy with that. So you don't want to do that with AI. I will say it is an age issue at some point. Like every college student has used ChatGPT, like no problem there. And I think it just kind of scales on up a little bit.
Yeah.
But well, good.
And I
So
think like kind of the internet, right? You had the dot-com bubble burst and, a bunch of companies go bankrupt, and that kind of initial excitement went away. And you'll probably see the same thing where there's so many AI companies right now, not all of them can be relevant in the next 5 years, right? So you're going to have a lot of companies go belly up and some of the investment dry up, and then it'll probably stabilize. But just like the internet when it was coming out, those early adopters, right? Those people who paid attention early on and found niche uses for the internet and now niche uses for AI, those are going to be the next Googles, the next Apples. 20 years ago, we're going to be talking about these companies that were founded during this AI revolution, or whatever you want to call it right now.
totally agree. And so I'm always interested in the differences, like what's not the same, right? And
Mhm.
so I completely agree with that. The startup prospect seems largely the same. Like create your company now. Like it's funny, you have college students wondering, should I launch a company right now? Yeah, you definitely should, like right now,
Yes.
especially if
Yeah.
you're in the AI space. We have an AI
Yeah.
club here. One of the students working
Mhm.
here in the office used to be all over that stuff. But so one difference I see is like NVIDIA is not WorldCom. Like that's a difference where there was overinvestment in the dot-com bubble by companies like WorldCom that eventually went bust because they were laying
Mhm.
cables. They were doing this
Right.
necessary infrastructure that lasted beyond the companies. But NVIDIA has blown up this last year because they're making chips that are important for AI. But those aren't like permanent chips that are just going to lie buried in the ground. Like they're going to have to
Right.
keep doing new generations. They have a crazy good business, it seems like. And
Yeah.
so there are
and
some
and one that's
established players
only
will
going to
do
be
better.
improved as AI continues to get better, right? And helps design the chips of the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you're, it
So
definitely,
that is a critical difference, right? In that some of the companies that went belly up and caused some of the problems, like you said, they were a one-time laying physical infrastructure, no long-term um, strategy in place for how they could continue to grow, right? Whereas
yeah.
some of these other companies like NVIDIA, right, they're going to continue to iterate on that endlessly, right? Like they're never going to have a final
Wow.
product. It's always going to be improving year to year, decade to decade. So that is a key difference,
Yeah.
I think.
I wonder if it's true or if it's just age or whatever. It just seems like the tech VC world is so much better developed than it was 25 years ago that there'll be like probably more tolerance for companies failing, that we'll know some companies are going to fail, but still this could be really big. And then
Mm-hmm.
you'll have some, like you suggested, some players just staking out territory. Like you don't have to be the best, you have to be the first sometimes. And so the Amazon, whatever the equivalent is for AI, like that company should do well. So pretty
Yeah, and
exciting. And yeah,
just being in the space, you're going to understand what is relevant and what isn't pretty quickly. And then the
mhm,
AI implementation has made it so quick to launch some of these companies that you can pivot fairly quickly, right? So even
mhm,
if your initial stab at it maybe isn't as successful as you want it to be, you should be able to pivot into where the industry is headed using the AI to help make that pivot. So that's exciting as well.
yeah, absolutely true. Yeah, the better optimization of every aspect, right? And
Right.
so yeah, so long term, so just kind of concluding thoughts for tech transfer. I think long term is if you're in an industry like ours, where you feel maybe a little undermanned, like we could use more people, like AI just offers the prospect of unlimited brains. Like you can just have as many brains as you want working on a problem, and you
Yeah.
already kind of can if you're willing to use it.
Yeah.
So that's what I see as kind of the huge upside. How does our job change if AI becomes smarter than humans? People are saying 2027. Who knows? But the but if AI becomes smarter than humans, like what is the role in tech transfer? What would humans do still?
I think there's still always the creativity aspect, right? There's still the fundamental research that needs to go on for the technologies. So even if AI was able to replace 90% of our job, right, there's still going to need to be decisions made on, okay, do we want this
Mhm.
deal or that deal that AI has served up for us, right, in terms of licensing? We have new incoming disclosures, right? There will still be decisions on relevancy of that research, right? Is this commercializable in which industry? And again, AI will fill the gaps. But I think the incoming technology and then final decisions on outgoing commercialization efforts will still always need to be passed through the hands of a human at some point, even if we're dumber than the AI, right? It might be, thinking, why is this human taking so long to make a decision about which deal to take for this tech? But
Yeah.
that will still always, I think, be made by a human. I don't know. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Oh, I totally agree. I think that's it
Yeah.
exactly. Like I think AI already, if you're paying attention, AI has already made us all managers. Like
Yeah.
what's going away is technicians. The idea, so I was a law firm attorney, you know, that's a type of technician. Like the idea that I'm going to labor away at my craft and that's where my value comes from. Like right now, we need people to do that badly, but in a few years, we might not, you know. But what we will need always is for people to make directional decisions, like you're saying.
Mhm.
And so management here in tech transfer, there are a lot of philosophical decisions we make, like what direction do we want to go? What matters more than other things? You can see at university, so especially at BYU, church-sponsored university, there are some things we could do that are consistent with our mission and some that aren't. And so
Right.
it's the human deciding we're going to do things that are consistent with kind of, you know, the what matters to us. And so I think those sorts of management things will continue. And I think it's exciting for anyone, even if you're straight out of college, even if you're a college freshman, to think, no, I'm a manager. I'm running an enterprise at some point, and I have people reporting to me. Maybe no human would work for me right now, but these AIs will. So I think that's a pretty great place to be, actually.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
Good. All right. Well, thanks, Bennett. So that's AI and tech transfer, and we'll be back next week with another episode.
Yeah.